You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. We're here ready to rock and roll on a glorious Tuesday night. Having lots of fun. I'm sitting here. I'm Derek, of course, here with Kevin and Alex. And I hear that both of y'all ran an unofficial 4.27 at the 40-yard dash here at the combine. And I know that wasn't the official time, but I wanted to get y'all's reactions to how that one ultimately played out for you and how you feel about your 40 times.
Yeah, I think once it got properly adjusted, it went up probably to about a 5.36.
In my prime, I think they still use the sundial to clock my 40, so we're doing okay. I made the right move to talk about sports instead of playing them.
Well, at least you were on the sundial. I don't know that I ever made it off the calendar. So as far as how they clock those things, hey, he started that time on a Monday and finished on a Wednesday.
Ouch! Brutal.
Mine was the whole BC to AD changeover. In that time frame, I made it 40 yards down the field. Hey boys, wild day, huh? Wild day on this Tuesday.
I don't know what you could possibly mean. Did something happen?
Okay, hold on.
I'm still recovering from the weekend, man. There was combine. There was college basketball. I'm officially back into college basketball. And let me tell you, that Duke-Carolina game Saturday night, Mike Krzyzewski's last home game, and to see the Tar Heels come in and just spoil that for him, that made me so happy. But, yes, lots going on today. NFL is ever present, and boy, are we here to talk about it.
So the NFL. Go ahead, Derek.
I was going to say the only thing that made me, sad about the whole college basketball scene this weekend was our UNC Bears, or their official season run was done with a loss over this weekend in the Big Sky tournament there. But it also, I was right there with you, Kevin. That win by North Carolina helped me recover there as well.
Did your sister, get over her, heartthrob of seeing JJ Redick for one last time before he kind of goes off into oblivion?
Maybe that was one of those. I didn't ask her on that one.
Oh.
But, I know that I was super happy watching those Tar Heels, win again.
It is championship week, and if you are men of a certain hobby, paying attention this week will do you a lot of good come next week when there are things to fill out and things to predict. So paying attention this week is a very good thing to do.
Would that certain hobby be something that Calvin Ridley should probably stay away from?
We'll get to Calvin Ridley in just a second, but
actually, he can on this because he doesn't play basketball.
It's true. That's true.
He's in the clear here. I've got plenty of thoughts on that. But guys, the NFL, the best way to describe this league is that it is an episode of The Walking Dead. Well, I say that, but hear me out. Hear the thought process here. Our good friend Craig describes The Walking Dead. Well, a normal TV show will start you off at like a 2 or a 3 on the intensity level, and then eventually it will ramp itself up into that 9-10 intensity level for an episode before bringing you back down to like a 5-6 to close it out, right? That's kind of a normal show arc, right? The Walking Dead, as Craig describes it, is just 9-10, 9-10, 9-10. The whole time, The Walking Dead, when you're watching an episode, the intensity level is just 9-10, 9-10. The NFL is just 9-10, 9-10. It is bombshell after bombshell after bombshell after bombshell. Remember 3 weeks ago?
If that's politically correct to be using those words right now.
Fair enough. If 2 or 3 weeks ago, remember Tom Brady retired, right? Tom Brady retired, officially announced it. And we were like, holy cow, this is the biggest story. It's going to dominate for days, like the greatest quarterback, the most successful quarterback of all time is walking away from the NFL. And then 3 hours later, Brian Flores is suing the NFL claiming discrimination. And it's like, holy crap, this is the biggest story. This is going to dominate for three. Tom Brady didn't even get, his 5 minutes of talk. Everybody pivoted right away later into the day. Today we Aaron Rodgers. Drama of Aaron Rodgers, and he is returning to did you guys lose me? He is returning to Green Bay, signing what we thought was a massive deal, but may not be a massive deal, but is still probably going to be a massive deal. And then not an hour later or an hour and a half later, the blockbuster trade of Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos. And it's just like, holy cow, like what you think is going to be the biggest talking point out of this league for the day isn't even the biggest talking point for the hour. Like, it is insane what this league is, and how, just how much it dominates the news cycle and the headlines in every single sports talk radio station. And the NBA can try with their playoffs, and the NHL exists, and NCAA tournament will be a thing, but you still know that every sports talk station you turn on, every episode of Sports Center, wherever you consume your generic sports stuff, it's always going to be dominated by the NFL. And so it's just 9-10 all the time. You never get to take a breath.
I love it. That's why we like it. There's always something to talk about, man. And as soon as you think you know what's going to happen, it changes just like that. And yeah, I mean, we went from Calvin Ridley yesterday to Aaron Rodgers this morning to Russell Wilson later this morning. And, now we're back in. We're talking franchise tags. We're talking draft strategy and what these guys are going to do. Obviously, you have the combine recap. I mean, it's never – for all the things that the NFL does that make people scratch their head, right? And specifically with the ways that they decide to levy punishment arbitrarily with no real guideline of, hey, this is what the punishment is for X. They get their annual calendar right. Everything is spread out just perfectly that whenever you think it's going to be a down period and you can kind of pay attention to the pretty girl back over here, they come and smack you upside the head and say, no, you focus on me, bitch. And they just get it. And it's awesome.
So, I mean, there's a lot of different things that we're going to talk about here, and let's go ahead and just start kind of settling into some of these grooves here. And we're going to, kind of go through all of these things, but let's go ahead and we'll just kind of start with the little bit older story there as far as some of the recent events that happened that we're going to talk about.
It should have been, again, the biggest story. A player was suspended for the entire next season. This should have been the biggest story of the week.
Right.
And it is a cliff note.
Right. It's one of those that it got everybody talking and now it's not. But for those of you wondering, it may have missed it. I don't know how you could have, but if you did happen to miss it, Calvin Ridley was suspended indefinitely by the league with a minimum 1 year on there, where he would be eligible to be reinstated in February of 2023 for gambling on NFL games. And from what I've heard, what I've read out there, it looks like he was gambling on the Atlanta Falcons to win in some parlay type of things through some of the various sport books out there. And let's go ahead and kick off the conversation with that. Guys, what are your thoughts on this one?
So Calvin Ridley got caught gambling through a legal betting app in a different state than Georgia. So he was down in Florida, placed 3 bets. I think it's a 5-game, a 7-game, and an 8-game parlay. So 3 separate bets. He says $1,500 is what Calvin Ridley has said. I don't have a gambling problem. It was $1,500. Dude, $1,500 just cost you like $20 million. Like, holy crap. Like, so it got flagged by said site, who then elevated up to the gambling commissioner of, to make sure it's all responsible, and they vetted it out and everything else. And then they turned their findings over to the NFL. In that case, there was consequences levied, and here we are. So it's very interesting. All these bets took place after Calvin Ridley stepped away from the team. So they didn't find any sort of influential process in what happened, which thank goodness, because holy cow, would that have been a nightmare for people to kind of digest and sift through and figure out what was going on. So we're not quite to the level of Pete Rose, who gambled on games he was actively managing in. But nonetheless, this is like the number one rule for all athletes in their contracts is you cannot gamble on the sport in which you play. It doesn't matter if you're playing tennis, if you're golfing, if you are a freestyle Olympic class swimmer. You cannot gamble in the sport, on the sport in which you play. Like, pick something else. College basketball, college football, because there are still tons of bowl games going on at this time, guys. Like, there are still plenty of college football to bet on. Professional basketball, hockey. I mean, pick something. If he wanted to gamble, there's nothing wrong with that. He's of age. It's legal. Like, it's not that he did something so wrong. It was that he chose the wrong lane, and now he has to pay a consequence for it. I understand that they're trying to send a message on this, but when you're only suspending players who physically abuse other people, whether it's a wife, whether it's a girlfriend, whether, who knows what this deal with Alvin Kamara is going to be, with the deal that he got out in Vegas during the Pro Bowl, the number of suspensions that Josh Gordon got levied on because he decided to, smoke some weed, and God forbid we have that. And this is where it is. So I get them trying to send a message, but why aren't they trying to send a similar message on matters that are just as, if not more serious, when we talk about the really kind of the epidemic of domestic violence, and really how the cases have done nothing but increase, specifically since COVID kind of started back in 2020, right? So there's a lot of things that I agree with. But again, going back to what I said earlier, there's so many things that the NFL doesn't do right. It's like, okay, we need to atone from all these sins. We're going to hammer this guy and send a message. But gambling doesn't have anything to do about laying your hands on a woman and what that should represent. So I feel like they're a little bit off the mark. 8 games, 10 games, okay, fine. But a whole season, I don't know if I'm swallowing that one very well.
I will tell you that the NFL is they only come off as giant hypocrites in this. It is the only way that they can be seen. The NFL will not only tout fantasy football, they have their own sanctioned fantasy football through their league, through their website, on through their league's website. They encourage fantasy football. They have betting partners. They have companies that are partners with the league. That is a promotional, sponsorship. Calvin Ridley, I think, is just unfortunate that he got caught. That's what it is. Calvin Ridley needed a fence. He wasn't smart enough to get a fence. That's what this is. But for the NFL to sit up in their high horse there in New York City at whatever their, tower is, and say, we will not tolerate this. And Kevin, you bring up a good point. When there are, players that are committing criminal acts that are only getting, 1/12 of whatever, the suspension that he's getting, 1/8 of the suspension that Calvin Ridley is getting, it does not look good for the league. The league looks silly. They want to hide behind this mystique of, we are the NFL and we want the game to be played fairly. if you wanted that to happen, you would increase the replay official, their capabilities. You would make the game fair within the rules of your competition committee. To say that gambling on the NFL, if you play in the NFL, is wrong is hypocritical based on all their promotional sponsorships, based on the fact that they promote fantasy football. And I know, guys, we can play fantasy football for free, and we do play fantasy football for free. But let me tell you, isn't it more fun? Isn't it more fun when you put a little money on it? Isn't it more fun when you've got the chance to win something like cash or a trophy? And guess what? Trophies aren't free. So if you're playing for a trophy, that there's money that goes into that. They encourage fantasy football. They have no problem with a guy saying, "Hey, shout out to all my fantasy owners after they have a big game." You think all those fantasy owners are playing free through the NFL, and you go through a different site to pay, or you get with your buddies and you pay up your league dues? It is so hypocritical for the NFL to say you can't bet on football, but then also encourage betting on football. It is unbelievable. Calvin Ridley did nothing illegal. He did nothing illegal, and he gets suspended for an entire year. Meanwhile, Ray Rice is on camera beating up his girlfriend at the time, I believe. And he got what? 2 games? 4 games? 2 games?
2 games.
He's committing
he was
criminal
cut
act.
and hasn't been signed.
Doesn't matter. That the league punishment was 2 games. The league punishment for Calvin Ridley is an entire year, if not more.
Right. That's the crux of it. It's indefinite with him being able to be apply for reinstatement in February of this coming year, of next year, right? So sitting out a whole year, and this is one of those that it's very strange. And Alex, I agree with you that the NFL just looks hypocritical in this aspect. And there's a lot of that kind of going around there as well, not just the NFL, but I watched this news story break on a couple of different channels, different places out there, and it was very strange to watch this thing play out, where you quite literally have big prominent names in the in the NFL, in the reporting space, admonishing his actions and talking about how poorly it was done and how you can't do this, and it's yada yada, just ripping this apart, forwards, backwards, every which way, about the actions that he did. And at the bottom of it, on the same screen, you've got the ticker rolling across with betting information for everything else going on there.
Brought to you by DraftKings or
exactly,
or
right?
Whatever. FanDuel.
I believe the NFL right now has 7 different partnerships with 7 different major casinos and sport books out there. So heaven forbid, you can go out there and you can do a advertisement, you can do a sponsorship deal with any of those things, being a player in the league. But heaven forbid you should use their products, which, by the way, if you're going to do an advertisement for something, I would hope that you would be using that service, but don't do that. Now, at the same time, when the NFL goes through and investigates this, and this is where I don't necessarily believe the crime fits the punishment type of thing in this situation, because of the fact that he was away from the game. This was not one of those that he had insider knowledge. He had, granted, he's got a better lens of looking at the game probably than other folks out there, but it was proven through the investigation that he didn't have any influence on this, didn't have any insider knowledge on this. He was betting for his team to go out there and win. This was one of those that you proved all of these things. He wasn't necessarily with the team at the time. So that's one of those that, how do you go through, and then are you going to go through and investigate every owner out there before they're an owner? Were they gambling on some of these things? Because were they not with the league? All of these different things. I think there's a lot of different ways that they could have done this and could have done better with this as well. And I think this is really one of those that to both of y'all's points, they fumbled this thing, in several different aspects.
More than anything, I think the NFL needs to make it so that you can, as an NFL player, bet on football, provided you're not betting in a game or you're not placing a bet in a game in which you are directly involved. That's to me, I have no issue with that.
I can get behind
legal. It's legal to do. If you're in a jurisdiction that it's legal to do it, it's legal to do. And now I understand that there are certain things where, jobs can have jobs can place, restrictions on you. Trust me, I know it. I've been involved in local media. There are restrictions on things that I can't do. That is signed into my contract. Like I can't do certain things. I get that, but let's be real. He's not physically hurting anybody. He's taking his own money, and as long as it's not a problem, which it can be a problem, but as long as it's not a problem, clearly, according to Calvin Ridley, it was $1,500, which to him, who makes $11 million a year, $1,500 is not a lot of money. So as long as it's not a problem and they're not betting directly on games that they are, or betting on games that they are directly involved in, I have no problem with it. Like, I have no problem. I think
they need to regulate it. On that one. I think I'm a little bit different than you on that one. If they're an active member in the league and they are still playing, like, that's where I think I draw the line. But where I have a hard time doing this is he had stepped away from the team. He was no longer with the organization, wasn't going to practices, wasn't going to the facility. That's where I draw the line. Because at the same time too, right, this is the comparison that I view this as far as where this goes. We have a player that goes out, retires. They, during their retirement, there's a year or two before they step back into the game. So during this time, player retires, they gamble a little bit on the NFL, they place some wagers on the NFL, they come back as an assistant coach 2 years later. Like, that's where I almost view this in the same vein, right? Like, Calvin Ridley was not with an organization, was not with the team, was effectively on a leave and away from the job on that one, and without necessarily a plan to come back at the same time. So I don't know that I can necessarily get behind the fact that, I would view those two situations very similarly at that point.
Well, I can't believe I'm disagreeing with you guys on this, but I am. Holy crap.
Okay.
He, right, wrong, or indifferent, is contractually obligated to follow those rules. Just like Alex said. Now, away from the team or not, he is still contractually bound to the team. They did not release him from his contract. He is an active member of the NFL who can participate in practice at any time he chose to come back, can participate in the health benefits, going to see the trainers, getting a workout in, going into the facilities, he could have gone to meetings. He didn't, but he could have. So I would argue that, yes, he's still an active member of the NFL at this point and an active member of the Falcons. Yes, they allowed him to take some time away for mental health and to try and get himself right. But the dotted line on his check is written by Arthur Blank and the Atlanta Falcons.
Right.
Like, no matter what. I don't understand why this is a hard rule for people to follow. It's no different than insider trading.
Right.
We would murder a CEO. I say murder. I shouldn't say murder. We would come unglued, right? A Fortune 500 CEO knows something we don't, and so he sells off X amount of stock before some bad news comes out and saves himself millions of dollars. And because it's blue collar crime,
let's be white collar.
Or sorry, white collar crime. We look at that number and we go, "Oh my gosh!" And he loses his job. He loses his job.
He also typically faces jail time and everything else.
But it's in the same vein, though. Like, does he know exactly what the game plan is? Maybe not, but I guarantee you he's still talking to teammates. They kept saying they were checking in on him. They were talking to him. They were making sure he was okay, on top of all of his other buddies around the league. Like, there's just too much information that these players can pass back and forth in any sport. This isn't just football specific. That it's a very slippery slope if you allow them to gamble on the sport in which they play. And that's why the contracts are written like that.
Right. And I
Hold on.
can see that one. Hang on here real quick. Let me just throw this thought out there. I can certainly see what you're going on with that one, Kevin. From my understanding, and I could very well be wrong on that one, it was my understanding that he had fully stepped away from the team to the point where he wasn't going through those things, as far as attending practice meetings, things like that.
And he wasn't, but he could have come back at any moment. He could have put that money on the game and then stepped back in the facility the next day, and no one would have batted an eye.
Right. Now that one is a moral dilemma there that I would absolutely agree with you on. Where it kind of gets a little fuzzy for me is the fact that I also believe that they weren't necessarily continuing and this is where I could be wrong here as well. I don't believe that they were still continuing to pay on the contract with him stepping away. And if they were still, right, like that contract, I would still see that as very much being a relevant thing. But if you take a leave of absence and they're not even paying on the contract anymore, in my mind, that would almost just suspend the contract. And again, that's a whole other argument and a whole other vein there. But
let me put this to you guys. Do you have an issue with NFL players playing fantasy football?
No.
No, probably not.
You don't?
They're also defined as two separate things, though. Very separate things.
Thank you. So you don't have an issue with them taking a prediction and saying, I think that this player is going to have a good day. Now, how is it different for the cornerback on whatever team it is who's going up against a wide receiver and they've got that wide receiver on their fantasy football team? Now, I know that not, again, as I said earlier, not all fantasy football is played for money. We play for free in plenty of leagues. A lot of our leagues, a majority of our leagues are for free. But how is that any different than when a player plays fantasy football? We all kind of laugh and chuckle when a guy at the end in a post-game press conference will be like, the kicker makes a 51-yard field goal. And they're like, yeah, it's great. I've got him on my fantasy team, and they're celebrating a win because he's their teammate. But that is essentially without the money. So the money is what we've come down to here. And that's where you have the issue. Is it with the money? Because it's the same thing. It's the same thing. You're saying this is going to happen. Well, how confident are you in that? Well, I'm not confident enough to put any money on it. Or this is going to happen. Well, how confident are you on that? I'm confident enough. I'll throw $1,500 on it. That's what Calvin Ridley did. That is no different than what we hear in the post-game press conference. And let me tell you how much the NFL loves it when fantasy football gets brought up by the players in the post-game press conference, because it drives their revenue.
And I guess what I don't know specifically is how fantasy football is written or acknowledged in those contracts.
That's fair. That's fair.
That's what I
But
don't.
they're allowed to play it.
But, okay, that's fine. Again, you're allowed to go to work, but you're required to wear a mask if you're not vaccinated. So what? If you don't wear your mask, then a lot of times you can be relieved of duty at your employer. It's all choices, right? And
Absolutely.
so, but that's the part I don't know. I don't know how the fantasy football thing's written up. I don't think these NFL players can do DFS because of however it's written, but they can do season that's the part I don't know. But what I do know is specifically in these contracts, players are forbidden, for lack of a better word, to gamble on the sport in which they play. And you sign the contract. You acknowledge the rules. You said you would follow them. It's no different than you acknowledge random drug tests. So if you pop hot for something, you're suspended games because you violated your contract and the league rules. It all falls into the same thing. My biggest complaint is the length of time. I'm good with him being suspended, and I'm good with the league saying we will not tolerate this. This is not okay. It's the apples to oranges and really side A being what I would consider domestic violence or any violent nature,
Any
something like that.
any
towards the game.
criminal thing. Yeah.
Right.
Anything that's criminal.
I view that to be more severe than the gambling side, but we have the penalties flopped, it seems like. So that's where my distaste for the NFL in this situation comes in. It's not that they levied a penalty, it's that the penalty, to what Derek said, the penalty didn't match the crime because you have these other true crimes, true actual crimes with law enforcement and grand juries and federal indictments in some cases and all this other stuff involved.
Victims.
Right. And these people are held at the appearance of more of a slap on the wrist than what it was to gamble, which is also against your contract. Like, that's where I'm going, what the heck, NFL? Like, that's where I feel like they truly screwed up.
Kevin, I believe that you brought me around to your way of thinking there, right? Like, and the argument that got me was the it's black and white in the contract. So I'll hop on board with you on that one there.
Before we end this, though, I agree too. Look, he did something he was not supposed to, and he very clearly went against the rules. And so, yes, I am in agreement with the fact. Look, he broke the rules. He got caught. He gets punished. Kevin, I agree with your point. The punishment does not fit the crime. Not a crime. It's a violation of contract, which typically means you get that contract null and voided. Unfortunately, for the NFL is not real life, right? So if you get your contract null and voided by one place, Calvin freaking Ridley, there's going to be another. Has to protect its assets that way, so that I'll keep going until you tell me.
There we go. He's back.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry. I knew what you were after.
Okay.
I knew what you're after, right? If you cut Ridley,
okay,
someone else is going to pick him up because his set of skills is so
somebody
desirable.
else is Right. So that's where it's different. And the league has to protect against that from happening. The league has to protect itself from its owners, essentially. Like that's what it comes. The other owners need to protect itself from the other owners. But while he did commit, a violation of his contract, he should get punished for that violation of contract. I just think that it's a hypocritical violation. Now I could see it changing. I could see the rules changing, and that it does become, as long as it's above board, that you are allowed to gamble if you're an NFL player on the NFL, provided, and there will be provisions to it, but I don't see anything wrong with it. If you're old enough to do it and it's legal to do, you're not breaking the law.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I can also see the argument for the integrity of the game. And, you have enough folks out there that like to claim that some of these games are fixed. I've seen that argument come up more times in the last 2 years than I care to ever
and that's never going to go away. It's never going to go away. So why not?
Right.
Why not try to benefit off of it?
But yeah, at the same time too, right? Like, that's one of the ways that to try and squash that and try and keep that in check is the simple fact of, we're just not going to allow that behavior to take place. But all right, well, let's go ahead and move on there. And for everybody out there that hasn't picked up, my voice is in and out here. So this has been a lot of fun. Let's keep trucking along here to one of the next big stories that broke today. And it was a story for all of like an hour, to Alex's point, before it got buried by the next big story. But let's go ahead and talk about Aaron Rodgers, who is coming back to Green Bay. Looks like they signed an extension there. It was initially reported 4 years for $200 million there. And then Aaron Rodgers coming out and saying, oh, well, y'all got all the details wrong, from the length to the amount of money to the only thing that seemed to have been gotten right there in his own wording was the fact that he will be back in Green Bay this next year. But gentlemen, what are your thoughts about Aaron Rodgers here heading back to Green Bay?
Hold on, I'll let Kevin go, because honestly, who gives a rip? I don't care anymore. I don't. After what happened an hour later, I do not care anymore.
It's not so much the Aaron Rodgers deal, other than once we find out the language and some of the ins and outs of this contract, the Packers are already up against the cap. So you sign Aaron Rodgers to a he's not assuming more money, right? He's getting more money. However, they're going to move the money around, all that good stuff. And then you turn around and franchise tag Davante Adams. If I'm Davante Adams, I'm going, well, what the heck? I stayed with you guys. I didn't throw a temper tantrum. Yeah, Rodgers is my boy and he gets me all these awesome numbers and stuff, but I'm out on the field every week. I make the Pro Bowls. I'm an all pro. I'm a vital piece of this offense. Why am I getting a franchise tag and you guys won't work something out with me? But you'll turn around and work something out with Rodgers, 2.5 years after you guys royally pissed him off for drafting Jordan Love. So I think that between the Davante Adams franchise tag and potential long-term contract that they're working on, in quotations, and this Aaron Rodgers deal, I am willing to put money on it right now that the Packers will not win another Super Bowl while Aaron Rodgers is their quarterback. They are going to be too cash strapped. They will walk through the NFC North like they have these past seasons, and then they're going to come into the playoffs and they will find some way to squander their opportunity, because that's what they do lately, right? They 13-3, 12-2, all these great regular season records where they can do all these great things, and then they get into the playoffs and they lose to everybody. They lose to the Giants, they lose to the 49ers, they lose to the Rams, they lose to the Buccaneers, the only team that they've beaten in the playoffs was the Cowboys, and I'm still arguing that Dez Bryant caught that ball. Like, it's just one of those things. Like, they shoot themselves in the foot, and in large part, it's subpar quarterback play given the situation and what's at stake and everything else. And part of it's the way they build the team. It's really hard to win when you only have one guy who you're willing to throw the ball to. That's on the Packers for not drafting wide receivers and skill position players, whatever. But the Aaron Rodgers deal in itself, good for him. He's coming back. He's with this offense. Obviously, they wanted him to come back after everybody played their poker face for the longest time. But I don't think that's going to translate into championships for Green Bay, because now between Rodgers and Davante Adams specifically, on top of the fact that they were already over the cap and they were trying to restructure all these contracts, they have like 15 guys, I don't know if it's all starters, but 15 guys from their roster last year that they're trying to find ways to work in at least some of them. Devontae Campbell, was a great player for him. He may not be back, and a couple other guys. So what's really the plan here? Because Valdez-Scantling, I believe, is a restricted free agent. St. Brown is an unrestricted free agent. Bobby Tonyan is a free agent. So it's going to be Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, and Davante Adams. Well, that's great, but only one of them actually runs routes each week. So what are you going to do when it comes playoff time and you can double Adams and you're forced to go somewhere else and can't?
Right. Well, it's very interesting too, Kevin. And I think you're spot on there when you say that Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers will not win another championship with him there. And mine has very, very similar vein to what you're talking about there, right? When we look back over a discussion I was having earlier today with some folks, it was brought up that you have not seen a quarterback really get over about 11-12% in that range of the team's total salary. Their salary has to equate, or their cap hit has to equate to, at most about 12% for them to be a champion, to be able to win a championship. Over the last 20 years, we have not seen a quarterback go out there and hit up their and win a championship with their cap hit being more than about 12%. Aaron Rodgers, as it currently sits, Grant, we don't have the details, but we can go off of what his contract structure was coming into this season anyway, where his dead cap hit, so what's against the salary cap this year, was $46 million coming into this season, which equates to roughly about 22 to 23% of the overall cap hit for him. So, and to that point, right? Like that's why the formula to win a Super Bowl has been to draft a young, good quarterback, win while they're on their rookie deal, so you can put all of these other pieces in place around them in order to be able to win and do that. Trapper Man chiming in saying, "Yo, what's up, Trapper Man? Thanks for tuning in here. Just talking about some of the Packers news going on with Rodgers signing." So, Alex, I see you've got a point. What do you got?
Yeah, like Rodgers is the beneficiary of at least in the regular season. Like the NFC North, guys, is not that great of a division. So he's obviously the best quarterback in that division. Now there have been times where other teams have made runs. Minnesota had a good run there for a little bit. Chicago hasn't been good in a decade, and Detroit hasn't been good since they started. Like they've never been good, right? So Aaron Rodgers has he's going to get into the playoffs every year because that division is just so bad that
Right.
You win that division and you get into the playoffs. And now, sure, they've taken advantage of winning some games that maybe they shouldn't have. Hell, even there were a couple examples this year that the Packers won games that they probably shouldn't have won. And that led them to their the number one overall seed. But still, like when you don't have to play competitive games in the regular season, I think it does translate to the fact that when it does get competitive and the intensity does get ratcheted up a little bit in the playoffs, you don't have that experience as a team. And I understand that individual players might have it, but teams are, we hear coaches talk about it all the time. They always talk about this team, because this team is completely different from last year's team. The logo, the uniforms, the colors might all stay the same, but it's people that make up the team. And those people are completely different, whether it's one piece gone or three pieces gone or whatever, the whole team turns over. Right. It's different. And so teams that don't go through something, high intensity situations often enough in the regular season won't really get it done when it comes to the postseason, when it is high intensity and every single play matters, every single decision matters when it comes to the outcome of, either playing next week or going home for the rest of the year. So I think him playing in that division, it doesn't really benefit him. It looks good on paper, but it doesn't benefit him when it comes down to it. And so I think it's an easy path for him to take. I don't fault him for it, by any means. You can only play who's on your schedule. But there's a reason for why they haven't been very good in the playoffs, why they've only won one Super Bowl, and it was what?
Alex, I think the Wi-Fi is blown away from you. There you're back. Maybe not. But no, I think you're right there. Where again, you're absolutely 100% correct. Where the team transfers from year to year, and the change over the carry rate is so crazy. Where you look at a team like Tampa Bay, who managed to bring back all of their starters for try to make another run at a Super Bowl off of a championship team there. So it's very, very crazy to think about that and how just insane that the turnover is there. Kevin, any other thoughts on this Aaron Rodgers deal with Green Bay?
No, other than I'm really interested to see what the Packers do through free agency to try and figure some things out, because they still need to get under the cap. Like the Packers are not the Packers are not in a situation where they can just go out and patch a couple holes to fill what Rodgers is trying to get them, or what Rodgers wants to have around him. So it will be interesting to see what the Packers do, who they can bring back, who they're going to let go. But they can't bring back everybody, and there's probably going to be some talented players hitting the free agent market because the Packers don't have the moolah. Thank you to Aaron.
Right. And then we've got at Bean824ever over on Twitter chiming in with, it doesn't And he gets timid in the playoffs, like he suddenly doesn't trust his ancillary options. But yeah, that's yeah. So definitely some good thoughts there coming in, and everybody kind of chiming in there that we don't necessarily think that the Packers are going to be able to make a run there going forward. Any other thoughts on this one, or are we ready to move on to where we've all have been waiting to dive into tonight?
Let's go. Let's go.
All right. So again, for those of you that may have not heard, the Broncos, our hometown team here, because we're all Broncos fans on this show, they made a little deal, and they made a deal to go out and get Russell Wilson. So the Broncos are acquiring Russell Wilson and a 4th rounder, and they're giving up Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, Noah Fant, 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and a 5th overall. So lots of picks, lots of players going on there. And this was one of those that my initial reaction, I'm not going to lie, when I first looked at this, and again, Kevin, you and I talked about this a little bit earlier today, where it was like, oh, that's a lot. Like it was a little bit of an initial sticker shock for me when I saw that. And when I thought through it, I'm like, oh, I actually really, really like this deal here. Over on Twitter at Bean824ever is saying congrats, guys. So he's happy for us with the trade there as well. We also had Bill Romanowski chiming in. Let's go Wilson. Bill, a good friend of the show, always chiming in and talking. I like that one a lot. So, but the Trapper Man on YouTube says that the Broncos get Wilson but lose Fant. It doesn't sound like he's that big of a fan there. So we've got some crowd reaction coming in here as well. But what are you guys' thoughts on this trade?
I think it's a great trade. I think it's a great trade. The Broncos were arguably going to be spending a 1st and or 2nd round pick on a quarterback this year anyway. So that's gone. Bring in Russell Wilson. Okay, fine. The Shelby Harris contract was it was a knee-jerk reaction. It was a bad contract from the start, so they're able to get out from underneath that. Okay, fine. We like Shelby Harris. He did a lot of things for the Broncos, special teams work as well as the defensive line. So he's a good player. He's not a great player. We're not going to shed a tear necessarily on losing Shelby Harris. Drew Lock, bye-bye. Like, get rid of that experiment. He can be Pete Carroll's problem for this year, or they can go find some other option. And that brings me to Noah Fant. And I know that people are bummed that Noah Fant was the guy who made the chopping block. And I'm telling you, it's better for the Broncos that it was Noah Fant. They didn't have to give up Patrick Surtain. They didn't have to give up Jerry Jeudy. They didn't have to give up
Cortland Sutton.
Well, good God.
Didn't have
Albert
to give
O.
up. See, I love Albert O. I think Albert O is going to put up the same numbers that Fant would have. Like, it's
athletically, they're so similar.
Well, they're so similar, and the Broncos loved O. Right. And it's at a cheaper price tag.
Yep.
He has an extra year left that Fant didn't. The Broncos were not going to re-sign Fant. Javonte Williams, that's who else I'm thinking about, because the Seahawks want a running back so bad. We didn't have to give up Javonte Williams. Like, all the pieces the Broncos didn't have to give up to get this deal done. I think it's a great trade. And to have Pro Bowl caliber play at quarterback, the most important position in all of sports, how is this all not worth that for the next 5 years, right? He has 2 years left on his current deal. The Broncos are going to start working on extending or scrapping and rewriting or whatever they're going to do. But he will be here for at least 5 years until he's 39. Okay, that's a good window. And in that time period, the Broncos have gone from 4th place in the AFC West to contending for 1st place in the AFC West. And I say that honestly because the Broncos defense, which is a top 5 defense, can compete with Kansas City given competent quarterback play. And they haven't had that for the last 5 seasons, 6 seasons since Peyton Manning left. Like, there's a reason the Chiefs have run roughshod over us for the most part. Now, our defense have kept it close in a couple games, and you can't tell me that the game in Denver this season where they held Mahomes to a career low in passing yards in the first half and all that. You can't tell me that having Russell Wilson at quarterback as opposed to Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock doesn't improve your chances in being able to move the ball up and down the field a little bit, right? You don't have the pick six that turned that game from a 7-point game to a 14-point game just like that, and it loses you the game. So I'm all about this. I think he instantly makes Jerry Jeudy better, and we've been waiting to see that happen. I think Cortland Sutton goes back to that 1,000-yard, 10-touchdown receiver and can be a true number one. I think that it takes pressure off of our offensive line a little bit because they're able to have confidence that the guy taking the snap knows what's going on. I think Nathaniel Hackett and his experience with Aaron Rodgers will be able to take some of those things, and between what Russell Wilson likes and what Hackett saw work with Aaron Rodgers, you can almost combine the two now. Russell Wilson probably has the best deep ball in the NFL too.
Yep.
So some of these balls that we saw in the first half of the season, not as much as we got in, but that we were just 2 yards off, right? Cortland Sutton was right there, and it was just 2 yards off. This is awesome. Like, the Broncos are still stacked on offense. Don't forget, you get KJ Hamler coming back. You have Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy, and Cortland Sutton. While they may not be like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Godwin, Mike Evans, and Antonio Brown. This is a very cap-friendly group of receivers. Cortland Sutton's kind of the old wily veteran of the group, but other than that, they're very young.
Let me ask you a question while you're on the vein of the Broncos wide receiver core. Rank them. Rank the receiving core in general, right? The guys that you're naming there. Rank them, NFL wise. Like, where would you put them? Are they a top 5 receiving core, top 10, top 15? Where do you got them?
In that group, I guess, for a group of 4,
even the top 3, like, Tim Patrick or KJ Hamler is a very, very nice piece on top of that. But do it for top 3 or top 4. Take your pick and tell me where you got them ranked.
As it currently stands, right? So all things not changing, I still think the Cowboys have the best because they haven't cut Amari Cooper yet. Mm-hmm. So that could change. But right now, I think the Cowboys probably still have the best overall receiving core. Trying to think who it's not Kansas City. Like, they have Tyreek and Kelsey, and then
they just signed Josh Gordon again.
Mecole Hardman,
whatever. But it's a jag between Mecole Hardman, between Byron Pringle, between Deshaun Robinson or Demarcus Robinson. Excuse me. Like, there's that. Yeah, I'm just not blown away. Like, I like. Honestly, Minnesota's is up there too because I like Osborne. Like, you had Jefferson, Thielen, and KJ Osborne. Like, I like that group of 3 a lot as well, guys. I really do.
But here's what it is.
Like, I mean, 3 or 4-headed monster. Like, and that's just receivers. You're not even tossing in tight ends. Like, Tampa Bay still is up there because they just franchise tagged Godwin, even though he's probably not going to play until November. But you have Mike Evans, and then you have Scotty Miller. You have Johnson, the kid out of Minnesota. Tyler Johnson. I like him a lot, actually. Yep. Like, I think he just got buried on the depth chart, but I like him a lot. So there's not many teams that have a true set of 3 or even 4 receivers that they can feel that comfortable with.
Yeah, Trapper Man chiming in with Chase, Higgins, and Boyd out there as well in Cincinnati.
That's a good one. Yep, absolutely. I like that one a lot.
So I think it's probably pretty fair to say that we would have the Broncos.
And the Rams.
Yeah.
And the Rams.
I think it'd be pretty fair to say that we'd have the Broncos receiving core as a whole probably between that 5 and 10 range, somewhere in there. So probably a top 10 receiving core pretty easily.
Yeah, I'd say easily. I mean, I think you make it figuring those 2 in. So what? Maybe they're 6.
Yeah, that's probably.
They could be somewhere between 4 and 7, and I don't think that too many people would try and fight you on that.
Right. That's kind of where I've got them as well. And the reason that I bring that one up is I saw a lot of things going on in the Twitterverse and across social media platforms today where, people were saying their instant reactions was now Russell Wilson. They're taking a downgrade on Russell Wilson because of him going to the Broncos, because the receiving options aren't as good as what he had in Seattle, because they're trying to just take the two top line guys, with it being, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Whereas most folks tend to forget that Tyler Lockett, outside of Russell Wilson, Tyler Lockett is not a very big receiving threat out there realistically. Like, he just isn't.
Boom bust.
Yeah.
He's a modern version of Deshaun Jackson almost, right? Like, he hits the long play. That's great, but then there's games where he just disappears. And West Coast, right? A lot of it's East Coast bias. Like, everybody on the East Coast, all these people in New York and Boston and Florida, and what do they know about Denver? Absolutely nothing. They know that there's a team out there. They know John Elway did something. They know Peyton Manning went there. Now Russell Wilson's here, but they don't know squat about Cortland Sutton.
Right.
They have no idea who Jerry Jeudy really is. They just see they see NFL Network talk about a metric his rookie season that he had 14 drops. Well, guess what? CeeDee Lamb had 15, and everyone still wanted to jump on his jockstrap. Like, I'm not going to buy into that. That's nonsense. People just, not doing their homework.
Right. And I think he got an improvement at running back. He got an improvement on the offensive line there as well. Got a massive improvement at defense. Like,
how crazy is that the Broncos offensive line, this offensive line might be the best offensive line that Russell Wilson's ever had. Like,
right.
Just think about that for a second. And he's an 8-time Pro Bowler.
Right.
And this might be the best offensive line he's ever had.
Yeah. And this is very much one of those that we've been saying for a while, that Denver is a quarterback away. Well, they got their quarterback. And now it's, hopefully they can pull off the same magic that the Rams did with the quarterback trade last offseason.
Everything that I've been saying today to anybody who's been willing to listen to me at work, which there weren't very many people willing to listen to me at work today because of this, but everything that I've been saying was like, oh, well, everybody's like, well, what did you guys give up? And it's like, who cares?
I did see the response immediately after I said,
who cares what we gave up? We got Russell freaking Wilson playing quarterback for us. Give up the next 5 drafts, because presumably what we're doing here is we are hedging our bets. We are taking the LA Rams mindset of win now. First round picks don't do you any good if you're in win now mode, because presumably those picks are going to be in the bottom 3 or 4 of the first round. If you're not drafting in the top 15, you're still kind of taking a gamble on a guy that you're hoping can contribute right away. That bottom half of the first round, you're hoping that he can contribute right away. There are no surefires after the top 10. Like, that ends. So if you've got a quarterback and you're like, hey, if we're a quarterback away from picking in the bottom 4 of the first round, let's freaking do it. And if we're a quarterback away from picking in the bottom of the first round for hopefully the next 5 years, give them away. Who cares?
Right.
Second round's the same way. If you're picking in the bottom of the second round, you're still essentially throwing a dart and hoping it sticks. Like, that's what those picks are. So I think we saw this with LA when they traded for Matthew Stafford. They traded away, all those picks to get all those guys, Von Miller in it. Keep in mind, the Broncos still own LA's second round pick. It's not like they leveraged the entire draft to get Russell Wilson. But like, that's the cost of doing business. And if you want to be, if you're in win now mode, a first round draft pick isn't going to do you any good, because guess what? It's going to take 3 years for that first round draft pick to finally be somebody, right? Unless it's like a freak of nature, like a Micah Parsons or a Joe Burrow. Took him 2 years, like, that's what you're talking about. Trevor Lawrence is 4 or 5 years away from being what we think he might be, because he's in a bad situation. So we're in win now mode. Draft picks don't do you any good. You are betting that those picks are going to be bottom 4 of the first round anyways, and those are still iffy at best. Those first round picks in the bottom half are iffy at best. You're just hoping that they pan out, and you're hoping that they pan out within 2 or 3 years.
Right. Well, most teams, once you get beyond about the 25th pick, they consider those second rounders anyway. So, that just to add on to your point there, I like it.
All right, Trapper, first things first. We did not acknowledge Super Bowl 48 on this show.
Never happened. Never happened.
It never happened.
I don't know what,
I don't know what
Went from Super Bowl 47 to 49.
Lights went out in New Orleans, right? And then Super Bowl 49. I no idea what happened. Was that the COVID year? Had to have been the COVID year. Right?
Yeah, it's something, right? Like we just didn't have a Super Bowl that year. So, Trapper Man, we'll get that straight first off. Second off, with your question, Trapper Man wrote in and said, do you think they wanted Rodgers first but got Wilson since he signed, or do you think they wanted Wilson the whole time? I think that they were really gunning for Rodgers until the Combine. And I think that the Broncos caught wind at the Combine when you have all these players and all this mingling going on, and they caught wind that Rodgers and the Packers were really close and working on something that was going to keep him there. And at that same time, Pete Carroll said, we have no intentions at this time of trading Russell Wilson or whatever he said. And I think that left the door open wide enough for George Payton to say, hold on a second. No intentions or never going to. And they got into it and the deal was struck. So yes, initially Rodgers was first on their hit list. And then the Russell Wilson news kept creeping up. And I think honestly that this happened pretty quickly. Like, I think that they caught wind Thursday, Friday at the Combine, and then they started putting pen to paper. They got through the Combine, through Monday negotiating. Tuesday, they finally came to terms. Boom, it's done. Like, I do think it happened that fast in the changeover from we really like Aaron Rodgers because we know he's disgruntled and he doesn't want to be there. It looks like they might have kissed and made up. Wilson still doesn't want to be in Seattle, though, so let's see what we can do there. And got it done.
Right.
I didn't catch all of what Kevin said there because the wind isn't blowing right to get the signal to my computer tonight. I got some signal issues.
You didn't get the tinfoil sail up just right?
Yeah, haven't got that figured out just yet. But what I did gather was that, a lot of this, took place at the Combine. And the Combine is actually a very, very important thing because that's the first time that a lot of these, NFL teams get a chance to see, like, okay, what do we want in this draft? What is the available player pool? Are we willing to, maybe snag an extra first or second round pick to grab up some more of this talent? Do we feel like this talent here is what we can work with? And so that is important. It is important that, they finally get a chance to interact with a lot of these guys, have meetings with them and interviews and then see their physical traits as well. So I think I saw the report from Schefter was that like this deal had been in the works for a couple weeks and that Rodgers was kind of, I think everybody's kicked the tires on Rodgers, even though the Packers are like, yeah, nobody's called us. BS. Everybody's called just to see what you were asking. It wasn't that nobody called. It's just they didn't like the answer that you were giving them. So I would say that Rodgers was probably, I think Rodgers was target number one, but I think everybody knew that the Packers were going to be asking for the farm when it comes to what they would give up for him. Whereas, the Seahawks a little bit more reasonable with what they're asking. And while they did get a good, they got a good haul off of Denver. Don't be like, I'm not saying that they didn't get a good haul. It's just the Broncos won the trade because they got the player, right? Like, I hate to steal that from Colin Cowherd, but that's what he says. And when you get the player, you win the trade. And the Broncos got the player. So right now they've won the trade. Now, that's not to say that if the Seahawks can draft well, they can win this trade back. But right now, the Denver Broncos, who were a quarterback away from competing in the AFC West and getting themselves into the tournament, how many games did we lose by one possession because we had incompetency under center this year, or because incompetency under center led to the defense being out there for 50 minutes of a 60-minute game, and they just couldn't hold up for that? The Broncos were a quarterback away, and guess what? Now they got a quarterback.
Yep. So, Chapman chiming in there, rank the QBs in the AFC West 1 through 4. He's got his rankings up there of Mahomes, Wilson, Herbert, and Carr. What are you guys' thoughts?
I can get behind that ranking. I'm comfortable with that until we really see what Wilson looks like in Hackett's offense, right? I think you have to leave Mahomes at the top of that list. He's dominated that division for the last 4 or 5 years. We like what Herbert does. He's a very promising up and coming quarterback, but that team just seems to underachieve left, right, and center. And then you have Derek Carr, who is he's just not flashy, right? And we've talked about this from time to time. It's not that Derek Carr's a bad quarterback, but Derek Carr's not flashy. Derek Carr doesn't do things that necessarily wow you. And he does become that forgotten soldier. So I agree with Trapper Man's list. Mahomes, Wilson, Herbert, and then Derek Carr.
Does the AFC West have the best 4 quarterbacks now? Like as a unit?
Yeah.
Of all the divisions?
I don't know that you can argue against that, right? Like you think back to our conversation that we had when we debated that, like who's an elite quarterback in the league, yada, yada, yada. Like Mahomes and Herbert for the most part were Mahomes was certainly in the list. Herbert was close to that list or in that list for most of us. Same thing with Wilson, was either in the list or close to the list on that one. And Derek Carr, to Kevin's point, isn't flashy and wouldn't be considered one of the elite quarterbacks in there, but I don't know that you can put him lower than a top 15 quarterback. Like he's easily a top half quarterback in the league.
I mean, yeah, he got him to the playoffs this year with everything that went on for the Raiders season. He was able to at least keep it together long enough to get him to a playoff spot.
Right, like Derek Carr's one of those guys that not necessarily going to take your team to the promised land by himself, but at the same time too is good enough to go out there, win games, not necessarily give games away. So, he's certainly not one of those guys that you're going to be constantly looking like, okay, he's in there for now, but we need that next guy. We're still a quarterback away. He's a guy that you could put, if you put enough ancillary pieces around him and enough good pieces around him, he can take you to the playoffs and potentially even a deep playoff run.
Yeah. I think this trade flipped the balance, the quarterback power rankings from NFC West when you had Stafford and Wilson and Kyler, and the Niners, who Jimmy G and Derek Carr are honestly kind of the same guy in a lot of cases, to the AFC West. Yeah. And now you have Mahomes and Wilson and Herbert and Derek Carr. So the rest of them have 2 for the most part, but they don't have that third guy to really bolster their quarterback prowess.
Right. So the other question coming in here, and then we'll move on to the combine here. Do you think the trade package would have been the same for Aaron Rodgers as it was for Russell Wilson?
No, if you guys remember from
Huh?
He's muted.
Oh my God, you guys just now caught back up. Okay. Do you want me to answer that question? I think the trade package would have been? Because I was going to go to the next one. But okay, well, we'll talk about the trade package. I don't think it would have been the same. I think that the Packers were asking for like a minimum of like 4, maybe 5 first rounders. I don't think it would have been the same as what the Broncos gave up to Seattle. I think the reason why the Broncos found a dance partner is because they found a willing dance partner. I don't think the Packers were a willing dance partner. I think they were doing the same thing as, do you guys remember how the Niners got Jimmy Garoppolo? The story behind that, right? Where John Lynch called up Bill Belichick and said, "Hey, what do you want for Tom Brady?" Bill Belichick goes, "You're not going to get Tom Brady." And he goes, "Okay, what do you want for Jimmy Garoppolo?" And so he got Jimmy Garoppolo. Like that was how he got it. And so I think that was kind of you got to find a dance partner, right? Broncos, I think the rest of the league quickly realized they're not moving off of Aaron Rodgers. And I would even venture to say that even if the Packers took a call on it, they probably said, there is nothing you can give up us. Like I truly think that they did.
And the win in Waco tonight sucks.
Yeah.
To Alex's point, I think I agree with his assessment. The package would have looked different. I think that the Packers probably wanted another first
Incredibly
round
hard to
pick,
negotiate with.
another pick in there somewhere. My guess is they didn't want Shelby Harris. They probably didn't want Drew Lock. But my guess is instead of Harris and Locke, they were probably asking for like a Patrick Surtain type, possibly a Jerry Jeudy type, to give them some different options, to give them some rookie contract relief and flexibility on what they had going on. So I do think the package would have looked different, and probably the price tag would have been moderately to severely higher for Aaron Rodgers than what it would have been for Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I would agree with you, especially when you talk about a guy coming off of 2 back-to-back MVP type of seasons there. Russ, you may have been getting also a little bit of discount because of that finger injury, things like that. And that deal still pending the physical, all of that. But Alex, you certainly did crack up Trapper Man there. So good work.
It's a true story. Like
It is a true story. It's absolutely true story.
John Lynch shared it. Like that's a damn near verbatim true story.
So. Okay, so back to Trapper Man's comment above that one, Derek. Do you guys remember when we were giving bold predictions before the season started?
Yeah, I do remember your bold prediction where you said all of the teams. Yep.
And what would have happened had Russell Wilson not got freaking hurt and missed some time this last year? I'm telling you, man. I think it's going to happen. And I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later, where all 4 teams from a division make it into the playoffs. I think it's going to happen. That
very well could be the AFC West this year. Very well could be. So I like it, guys. Let's go ahead and head on. Unless you guys have some other thoughts here on any of the news going on. Let's go ahead.
I could talk about that all night. We might as well move on.
All right, let's go ahead and move on. We'll go ahead and give some Combine reactions. So for those of you that didn't know, the NFL Combine happened this past week. You saw the Underwear Olympics take place. You had a lot of folks kind of opting out from some of the workouts. Some of the scheduling there looked like it may have played a part in some of that. So very interesting then to see how that one looks and works. And Trapper Man, when you're talking about give your records and predictions, we will get into records and predictions heavily as we get in closer to August, when we really start breaking down divisions, teams, all of that. But we're going to be breaking down all of these teams as we go through the offseason here, starting right after the draft. We're getting geared up here for the draft and starting with the Combine here. So Underwear Olympics taking place this last weekend. Guys, what are your takeaways and reactions to the NFL Combine?
My Georgia Bulldogs showed out. Headliner, Jordan Davis, right? The big man rumbling down his 4.68 or 4.78 40 time, right? 0.2 faster than one Patrick Mahomes. It was just, honestly, that was kind of cool. That was cool to see. I was glad to see him do it. I think Georgia legitimately has a shot of 7 first-round picks in this year's draft. We'll see how it shakes out, but I do think that they're in reach of getting that, depending on how the back end of the draft goes. That on top of, there is so much speed at wide receiver coming out in this year's draft, guys. Like, holy smokes, these guys are blazers. So that'll be fun, right? Speed doesn't always translate. We've seen a number of times, pick a Las Vegas Raiders wide receiver first-round draft pick that has a bunch of speed that's actually panned out. So, but I think that it's offensive linemen. There's only a couple, 2 or 3 at the top, and then it really kind of falls off. It's a good draft for wide receivers and defensive backs. And I think you have, 3 edge rushers and then about 5 interior defensive linemen that really make up the first round, right? And then after that, this is a good depth. This is a good depth class. I don't see too many superstars coming out of this class at skill positions, but I do see a lot of quality depth. We'll see a lot of really good number 2 guys. We'll see a lot of guys who have chances to make their mark, but I don't know that I see any one particular skill position player outside of, maybe the kid from A&M. I can't remember his name. Anyway, I think the Alabama guys are good, but not great. They're not in that same class that Jalen Waddle, even Jerry Jeudy graded out at. Definitely not Calvin Ridley grade, that type of thing. So I do think there's a drop-off there. Tight end's going to be lacking again. I'm not blown away by the tight end class, but it was fun. I watched more of the Combine this year than I've probably seen the last 3 years combined, but it was a lot of fun for me this year.
As I didn't have watch the Combine for work this year, which was the first time in a long time, I guess second time in a long time that I had to watch the Combine for work this year. I didn't catch too much of it. Obviously, I paid attention to a few players that I thought, I was keeping tabs on. One was Christian Watson from North Dakota State. Had himself a pretty decent Combine, 11.4 in the broad jump, I think. Ran a pretty fast 40, part of that speedy wide receiver group that Kevin was talking about. It will be interesting to see who made themselves some money. I think we all kind of have an idea as to the guys that made themselves some money over the last couple days, but it's interesting that they switched it to prime time. I think that's kind of weird for some of these guys to be working out that late. I'm also curious, like some of the backstory of some of those guys. Were working later in the night to what is this? Yeah, yes, they are. Yeah, I've seen them. I've seen them in person. But I would be interesting to know some of the backstory of those guys that were starting to work out later in the night, because a lot of these guys are creatures of habit. And you guys know, if you're playing a night game, odds are you're having your practices a little bit later in the night, that the week before. If you're playing an early game, you're waking up earlier a little bit more to get yourself going. So I'd be curious to see if that, kind of threw some things off. I did get a chance to see some of the quarterback workouts. Underwhelming, I guess, is probably the right way to put it. Like, we knew it wasn't going to be that great of a quarterback class, and
Malik Willis has an arm, though. Did you see that?
Yes, I did. I did see that. I did happen to see him try to throw it out of Lucas Oil Stadium. Like that, I did see. But beyond that, like, it's all fine and dandy if you can throw it that far. Can you have somebody actually go and catch it? That's quite another issue. But yeah, I thought that the quarterbacks were a little underwhelming, which is, the Combine is really a good chance to see what these quarterbacks look like, because, there's so many factors throughout the course of a game that, what they look like on film. You never really get a chance to see them in practice and see what their true skill set is based on, what they can do. So it was interesting. I think, as always, there will be somebody who goes too high in the draft because they had a good combine or a good pro day. As we always like to say, the film doesn't lie. But sometimes when you put it on film in front of, ghost defenders, it looks a lot better.
Fair enough. Yeah, there's lots of good takeaways there. One of the other stories coming out there, and this is where I was heading anyway, but Kenny Pickett's hand size. Like, I always love the fact that you got all of these guys coming out, with hand size really being a de facto measurable that everybody gets caught up on there. For me, hand size doesn't necessarily matter that much. And I get the understanding for it, with a lot of folks saying that, the bigger the hand size, the more ball control that they'll have. They'll have a tendency to fumble the ball less, some things like that. And for the most part, like, this is the crazy thing, right? So a little bit of some factoids here. The guy that led the NFL in fumbles at the quarterback position in 2021, Dak Prescott, had a size 10 hand. That's a top 5 type of hand size in the league. 2020 was Daniel Jones, who had a top 15 hand size, and Daniel Jones in 2019 as well also led the league in fumbles. Again, so most career fumbles, by the way, was a guy named Brett Favre, who would have the biggest hand size of any starting NFL quarterback in the league this year. So one of those that I can see it, but it doesn't. I just don't necessarily believe it correlates as strongly as a lot of folks tend to think.
I'd like to see grip strength to go along with
that. I think would be a better,
and to see if there's a correlation there. Like,
right.
And I don't know. I mean, you have that workout hand strengthening, forearm strengthening tool. Like, I don't know if there's a way to put a sensor on that to kind of gauge accurate grip strength, or if they had a ball that they put sensors in.
They got those arcade things that you can grip it and it shoots a little light up and all of that. Like, I'm sure that you can wire that thing where it judges it.
Yeah, that's something that I would be interested in seeing, just to understand if you can come up with a correlation between the two. That their hand size might be 9.5 or 9 1/4, whatever Kenny Pickett's was, but does he have 8.5? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So does that hand size? Does his grip strength make up for the hand size, right? Like, does that mean he's a bottom 5 in hand size, but is he a top 5 or top 10 in grip strength to kind of balance that out? And that's just a metric that people haven't asked for, or the analytics geniuses in the NFL decide that isn't a comparable in one way or the other.
Right. And I think what a better correlation is for fumbling is guys that hang on to the ball longer, guys that tend to try and extend plays, make plays happen, things like that. There's a much stronger correlation to guys that have the most fumbles with the guys that tend to hang on the ball longer, try to make plays, things like that. Like, you don't
time to release metrics to go along with fumbles. Yeah,
exactly. Like Ben Roethlisberger, who had one of the quickest releases out there, not really fumbling the ball. You know why? Because the ball's not in his hands long enough for somebody to get back there to touch him. Same thing with Tom Brady as he got longer into his career. Like, Ben
Roethlisberger was dragging guys the first 7 years of his career. He's like a refrigerator out there playing quarterback.
Right. But I'm willing to bet you that he had a higher fumble rate through his first 7 years than what he had this last 7 years. If we look at it, and I think there's a very strong correlation to it that I don't know that you'll necessarily see a ton of difference there, whether or not a guy has a 9-inch hand or a 10-inch hand, as far as that goes, versus that time spent with the ball in the hand. So, I get what you're saying there, where, Trapper Man with the hand size and all that. I don't know that. I have yet to see a correlation out there with the bigger the hand size means more wins on the from an NFL quarterback there. So, Joe Burrow, who went through and had a fantastic season, has some of the smallest hands out there. I remember there was some jokes circulating not that long ago that Joe Burrow thought about retiring after his combine because of his hand size there being as small as it was. So again, I don't know that there's any correlation between hand size and winning football games. I have yet to see any data that would lead me to sign off on that one.
And I'll tell you this too. We just got done gushing over Russell Wilson. I have stood next to Russell Wilson. I am 6 foot on a low gravity day. A very, very strong, very strong 5'11". Russ is listed at 5'11", and let's just say that if he's 5'11", then I'm 6 foot. Like, that's where we're at with it. So height doesn't matter. Small hands, as long as you don't, fumble the football or you get rid of it, you're not turning it over, who cares?
Right. So I like it. Guys, what are any other thoughts here on the combine?
No, not at the moment. We'll go back and look at some of this and see what we can break down a little bit as we start getting the position groups here in the coming weeks, and kind of at least given what our top 5 or 6 are at each position group, and breaking it down that way. But like I said, I'm not seeing a whole bunch of all pros necessarily. But we've been proven wrong, right? I mean, the Tom Brady's of the world, hell, the Russell Wilsons, right? Drafted in the third round, passed over everything. Aaron Rodgers going at the bottom of the first round instead of to the Niners at the very top. Like, we all make mistakes, including the guys who get paid millions of dollars to figure this crap out. So, we're going to take some looks at it and see what our thoughts are. We'll be more than happy to share them with everybody when those segments come up.
Absolutely. Trapper Man has one last question. We'll answer this one, and then we're going to call it a night here. What do you guys think that Pittsburgh will do at the quarterback position? What are your thoughts here at the quarterback? Right now, I think that Pittsburgh's going to be in a bit of a holding pattern when it's all said and done. I think that, they've gone out there. I think they're going to use Mason Rudolph as a bridge quarterback this year. It's not going to surprise me if you see them maybe try and take a Kenny Pitt or try and take Malik Willis to try and develop a little bit there and just use Mason Rudolph as a bridge type of quarterback. That's really where I think that you're going to see them do this year. I don't necessarily see them doing anything big, splashy, fancy, anything like that. I think they'll probably try and draft somebody and just go that route.
I think they take a run at Jameis. Like, I don't think that they're in love with what Mason Rudolph has to offer. Obviously, there's a Marcus Mariota, there's Jameis Winston, there's Teddy Bridgewater, which would serve okay in that Pittsburgh offense, right? It's a quick release offense. He's not asked to do a whole lot and, drive it down the field a couple times a game. That's about it. So I do think that they go in search in free agency to some extent, but the Steelers are under cap hell also. So that's something to be on the lookout for. But in the draft, I think they're going offensive line here, trying to reestablish some dominance, right? And see what you can get going, knowing that you're going to have to lean on Najee for at least the next year or two before you can get truly competent quarterback play week in and week out.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to draft one, whether or not it's a guy that they think is going to start right away or it's a project, which I think all of these quarterbacks in this class, I think they're all projects. So I think whoever they draft probably doesn't start week one, but the Jameis is very interesting to me. Like that seems pretty reasonable. But I still think that they're going to pick one in this upcoming draft, and whoever it is likely isn't starting week one, but will be there hopefully to get them to where they can get a place where they feel like they can find a franchise guy.
As long as the pre-draft hype doesn't take off on these quarterbacks, but it does every year. So I know this is a big if. The kid out of Cincinnati. I keep wanting to say Spencer Rattler, but that's not the guy. It's was it Ridler? Anyway, the quarterback out of Cincinnati, so I'm thinking of, and his name.
I believe it is Ridler.
I think that Pittsburgh could be eyeing him. He's a bigger bodied quarterback, kind of like how Roethlisberger was coming out of Miami of Ohio. Miami of Ohio. So it's a possibility, but I think he's going to be gone by then because Pittsburgh's drafting at 20. And I think you'll probably have 3 quarterbacks go in the top 15. I don't see them all going inside the top 10 this year. The prowess just isn't there at the moment. But for Pittsburgh, if they really like a guy, they're going to have to move up 10 spots. That's a big price tag to pay to jump from 20 to like a 10 to get a guy that you really, really like at quarterback. So it's going to be tough sledding for them to get their signal caller in the first round of this draft.
I could see that. I could also potentially see a guy like a Matt Corral still being there. Potentially see a Sam Howell still being out there at pick 20. Like I could potentially see those guys slipping down there, which if they're there, I could see them doing.
I think Corral's going to be gone.
He very well might be. Like you said, these quarterbacks get going crazy.
Corral's his last game, he blew his knee out. So there's going to be some questions.
It is, but you have teams that they're trying to figure out what they're doing still, right? I don't think the Lions at 2. I think
they're taking defensive. I think they're taking the kid out of Michigan.
Right, but then the Giants at 5, the Panthers at 6, the Giants at 7 again. If they're really not in love with Daniel Jones, the Seahawks now at 9.
Yeah,
like the possibility, that Malik Willis goes there. The Commanders are at 11. They're looking for a quarterback. The Browns, if they're not happy with Baker and they don't want to go long term there, they could try and start over. And not that every single one of the teams is drafting a quarterback, but there's a lot of potential pitfalls for you to just bank on your guy falling to you at 20.
Right. Yeah, you're not going to be able to get that Mac Jones luck that the Patriots got last year very often.
The worst thing that Ben did.
Rigged. It's not the games that are rigged. It's the freaking draft for the Patriots.
The worst thing that Ben did was get him into the playoffs this last year.
Fact. Absolutely. Well, guys, I do believe that's going to take us down to the end of it. Any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
No, stay tuned. Player breakdowns, we got team breakdowns, positional groups. The news in the NFL never stops. We got free agency coming up on top of all these pro days that are going to be coming up for these guys as well. So more information to put some things together. And I think there's rumors of us doing our Draftapalooza again this year, where we did our 5-hour kamikaze stint with like 50 different people on and off the show as the draft went on. So I think we're going to try and strike that one up again. So we got a lot of fun stuff coming up here the next couple months.
Just get used to hearing, all right, thanks everybody. Take care. Go Broncos.
I like it, Alex. So, guys, that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for us. Do us a big favor. Follow us on the
weather fan.
Just as long as he doesn't say go Bronx. Because he always said go Hawks. He's got to say Broncos. You can't say just go Broncos. Go Broncos.
Yep. All righty. Well, guys, go ahead and do us a favor. Head on over to your favorite social media platform, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, at Good Old Boys FF. Give us a follow and, interact with us. We always enjoy interacting with folks, taking your questions, helping you out where we can, trying to get you those cash and trophies. One of the biggest ways that you can help this independent podcast is to head over to YouTube. Click on the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast YouTube channel. Click the subscribe button. Ring that bell. Make sure you get all the notifications from when we go live. He's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe.